The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. Glory to you, Lord. Jesus passed through towns and villages, teaching as he went and making his way to Jerusalem. Someone asked him, "Lord, will only a few people be saved?" He answered them, "Strive to enter through the narrow gate. For many, I tell you, will attempt to enter, but will not be strong enough. After the master of the house has risen and locked the door, then you will stand outside knocking and saying, 'Lord, open the door for us.' He will say to you in reply, 'I do not know where you are from.' And you will say, 'We ate and drank in your company, you taught in our streets.' And he will say to you, 'I do not know where you are from. Depart from me, all you evildoers.' And there will be wailing, grinding of teeth, when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, and you yourselves cast out. And people will come from the east and the west, from the north and south, and will recline at table in the kingdom of God. For behold, some are last who will be first, and some are first who will be last." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise Lord Jesus Christ. As we often find in the Gospel, the people listening to Jesus, who thought they were observant Jews and the chosen people, were in to have their comfort zones expanded when they asked, thinking only Jews would be saved, and how many will be. And then Jesus ends up saying, well, it's not going to be easy, and it's not just going to be you. People will come from the north, east, south, and west, and they will all be invited to the kingdom of God. So it was a revelation to them what they thought the reality was, and the challenge that Jesus has for them, saying that you need to be strong to walk this journey. It's a revelation to them, which reminds me of one of my favorite Flannery O'Connor stories. As you know, Flannery was born here and raised as a young girl. She was known as Mary Flannery in those days, but she died at 39 back in 1964, a Savannah native. And so the story called Revelation is a short story. What I like the story, but also my Uncle George Haslam knew the O'Connor family in Savannah, and he was teaching in Milledgeville at the time and would often go for Sunday lunch over at the O'Connors. And so one day Flannery was talking. Wasn't that many doctors in Milledgeville, so as she sat there in the office looking around and hearing all these stories, it gave her, if you remember the story of Revelation, it gave her the meat that she developed into the story, but she was sharing this with her family, and my Uncle George was there. And so the Revelation is about this fine, outstanding lady. You know, this was written back in the 50s, and Mrs. Turpin, and she's very grateful that God did not make her, and Flannery's point, you know, if you're hard of hearing, then to be heard, you have to speak loud. So Flannery thought that there's a spiritual malaise in society. And so her stories sometimes are way out there. They're violent, they're crazy. But her point was that most of the people, you know, when they hear things with a Christian theme, it's going to go in one part of the brain and not the other. So she uses stories and people and situations to kind of shock people into listening, and then she was very Catholic, and most of her stories have some, you know, Catholic influence. So Miss Turpin is sitting there at the doctor's office, and she's thanking God she's not like the poor white trash, and she's not like the sick who come in, the deformed, the black. She's just thanking God because he made her, you know, with a little bit of everything. She just said, God gave me a little bit of everything, especially she was so thankful for her husband, Claude. And so in the doctor's office, when she was there and she was reflecting, she just out loud said, thank you, Jesus, for all that you've done for me. I'm not going to, ruin the story. You can read it, but a traumatic something happens in the doctor's office that traumatizes Miss Turpin. So she blacks out, and then she goes home, and I want to read just the conclusion of the short story, which in Flannery's words were this. As Miss Turpin is recovering from this trauma, she looks out in the fields. She was on a farm, and she sees this vast swinging bridge extending upward to the earth, as she says, in a field of living fire. So Miss Turpin is very interested in seeing who's going to heaven. And so as she's looking at this, she says this vast horde of souls were rumbling into heaven. But as she watched, in the front of the line, and these are the author's words, there were whole companies of white trash who for the first time were cleaning their lives, for blacks who were in white robes, and battalions of freaks and lunatics shouting and clapping and leaping like frogs. And much to Miss Turpin's amazement, these were the people who were last, and they're first. And who's bringing up the end of this line going up? But all of these proper people whose lives were just, blessed by God, and they're all at the end of the line. They're not the first, they're the last. And this amazes her, and she can see that the end of the line, people like her, they're just shocked. And, as they realize that they're not the first to enter in the kingdom of God. And so, she just was amazed at this. And the story is just, it was a revelation to her. And I think certainly maybe had some influence on the gospel where the first are last and last are first. So, but two questions that Jesus had to deal with in the revelation that he dealt his disciples. One was, who's going to be saved and how many? And so in the minds of people who were listening to Jesus, they knew who were saved. It was Jewish people. They had a covenant with God. They were his chosen people. But Jesus says, well, that's not always the case, that you can go through all the rituals and observe everything, all the outside things, but if there's sin, if there's, sinfulness in your hearts, you're going to come and say, well, Lord, we went to church. We tithed 10%. I even went to Bible study. And the Lord says, you better be careful, because at the end of Judgment Day, he might say, I really don't know you. And you're going to say, well, I was there. I did all these things. So sometimes I saw in the bulletin this weekend there's a information class coming up for people interested in the Catholic faith. And many years ago, as we started the RCIA program, we would ask people, why are you here? What brought you to this class to study the Catholic faith? And this woman said, well, my hairdresser got me here. And I said, well, this is an interesting story. I said, so tell us a little bit more. And she says, well, the ladies that cut, she goes, and there's a couple ladies cutting hair. She said, they're all nice people. But she says, as soon as you walk out of the beauty parlor, she says, the gossip starts. And did you hear that about her child or her husband? Or did you hear about her? And she said, sometimes it got a little vicious. But she said, the lady that cut my hair, she said, I never heard any gossip coming out of her mouth. So one day I just said, I like coming here and I like all the ladies that work here, but she says, you're the only one that I never hear any gossip. And she says, I'm curious to, why that's not part of your life. And she says, I'm a Catholic, and if I don't have anything good to say about somebody, I won't say anything. And because of not what that woman did and not what she said, this woman joined the Catholic Church because she was inspired by the lady who cut her hair. So it's not always the rituals and what we do, it's sometimes what we don't do, and Jesus is very clear, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to get into the kingdom of God. And so you might say, well, if the gate, is so wide, well, I'm a good and righteous person. I do everything right. Gates is going to be right there open for me. Or the other extreme, you might say, I'm such a sinner, and the gate's so narrow, I can't change the sinfulness in my life. I'm just going to be stuck here, and so I'll never make it into heaven. But Jesus doesn't say how many. He just says, it is a struggle. And so when you look at the Greek word that is used in there, it means it's like a marathon runner. As you get close to the finish line, you really are working hard to get there. And so the word strive means more that it's straining with your whole life. You take great pains to enter and to get what you achieve. And so basically Jesus says only the strong are going to get in, which is us who strive to live righteous lives. And so what are some of the things, that do not allow us to live righteous lives? It's not the 10 suggestions, it's the 10 commandments. And so when we look at our lives and we see things like, I really, I'm not honest. I cheat at work, I cheat, I steal sometimes, just little things, but I do steal. And I don't tell any big lies, but if it keeps me out of trouble, I do lie. I'm envious of what other people have, and I want it. I don't use my sexuality in an appropriate way, but that's the way I am. I hold grudges if somebody hurts me. I wish the monkey pox would come on their head and make them sick. So, it's very easy to fall into these behaviors, which Jesus says, unless we're working really hard not to allow that type of behavior into our lives, we may get to the pearly gates and we're going to say, I was at Mass at St. Michael's every week. And Jesus says, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. And you're going to say, well, why? And he said, again, your heart was hardened. There was no room for me to come in, and there was very little effort for conversion to deal with your sinfulness. We're all saved sinners. And so unless you're willing, to work and strive hard to live a righteous life and to allow the Lord's presence, we're not going to get into heaven on the coattails of our parents, our godparents, our grandparents. It's up to each one of us. No one's going to get us into heaven but ourselves. But as Jesus says, people are going to come from east, west, north, south. There will be a large group who work and strive hard to enter the kingdom. But again, the bottom line is we have to choose and make that effort to enter in through the narrow gate.